In the early medieval period, daily life was defined by scarcity, unpredictability, and the constant presence of failure. Products, tools, and implements that people used were often crude, unreliable, or poorly made, yet they persisted because the alternative, having nothing, was far worse. Chapter 1 explores the very first examples of medieval products that failed spectacularly yet survived, setting the stage for understanding how tolerance for imperfection became a defining feature of medieval life, and how that mentality has echoed down to modern times. Take, for example, the most basic of medieval household products: wooden utensils. Spoons, bowls, and ladles were carved by hand from timber, often with tools no sharper than small chisels or knives. The wood splintered easily, especially when exposed to heat, water, or repeated use. Spoons would warp or crack. Bowls would split under heavy contents, and ladles would sometimes snap while stirring thick stews over an open fire. Yet these wooden utensils were indispensable. People could not survive without a way to eat, serve, or cook food, so they learned to work around these flaws. Cracked bowls were patched with resin or bound with metal strips. Broken spoons were sometimes reshaped into smaller spoons, or their handles were reinforced with strips of leather. The durability of a utensil was never the measure of its usefulness, survival was. Modern wooden spoons and cutting boards have benefited from industrial milling, chemical treatments, and hardened finishes, but even today, splintering, warping, and cracking remain occasional challenges, a subtle echo of medieval imperfection. Another striking example comes from medieval clothing and footwear, which were simultaneously essential and frustratingly unreliable. Wool and linen, the most common fabrics, were often unevenly spun or woven. Wool garments shrank after washing or exposure to rain, while linen tore easily under strain. Shoes, usually made of rough leather, wore out quickly and often left the wearer's feet exposed to the cold, mud, or sharp stones. Fastenings such as pins, clasps, or buttons frequently failed, leaving robes gaping or shoes slipping off. Yet clothing and shoes could not be abandoned, and people adapted. Garments were layered to compensate for gaps or holes, and shoes were patched repeatedly. Social and cultural norms demanded a minimum level of decency and protection from the elements. So people tolerated discomfort and inconvenience as a necessary compromise. Modern clothing, of course, is far more reliable thanks to advanced textiles, rubber soles, and precise manufacturing, yet torn seams, worn-out shoes, and poorly fitting garments continue to echo the same medieval challenges. The principle is clear. A flawed but functional product is better than none, and adaptation is more important than perfection. Lighting is another domain where medieval products failed in fascinating ways yet persisted, because they were essential. Candles, made from tallow or beeswax, smoked excessively and burned unevenly. Rushlights, simple sticks of plant fiber soaked in fat, would sputter and go out entirely at inconvenient moments. Oil lamps leak, filling rooms with odor or causing minor fires. People developed strategies to compensate. Multiple candles or lamps were used in the same space. The wick length was adjusted carefully, and activities were often scheduled around predictable light availability. Without light, work, ritual, and social activities became nearly impossible. Modern electric lighting reduces these problems significantly, yet flickering bulbs, outages, and faulty wiring are reminders of the ancient struggle to maintain illumination reliably. The medieval principle survives. Imperfect light can be made functional through adaptation, redundancy, and careful management. Even the most basic agricultural tools reflected the tension between necessity and failure. Wooden plows, essential for tilling land, frequently splintered or cracked under pressure, especially when encountering hard or rocky soil. Metal plowshares dulled quickly, and replacing or repairing them was costly. Hoes, rakes, and sickles were uneven and often caused injury to the user or livestock. Yet people persevered because without these tools, the risk of famine was immediate. Solutions included reinforcing plow handles with leather or metal bands, using multiple tools simultaneously, or improvising with locally available materials. Modern farming equipment has drastically reduced such failures, but wear, breakage, and occasional inefficiency remain, reminding us that tools are rarely perfect. In the medieval context, even failure was a managed and accepted part of productive life. Food storage was another area, where failure was both common and consequential. Wooden barrels leaked, ceramic pots cracked, and baskets attracted pests. Salted meat often spoiled, grains became infested with weevils, dairy products turned sour quickly. Despite repeated failure, some method of preservation was vital. Medieval households developed redundancy strategies, such as storing the same food in multiple containers, rotating stock, and continually checking for spoilage. Today, refrigerators, vacuum-sealed bags, and airtight containers dramatically improve preservation, yet leaks, spoilage, and contamination remain occasional issues, echoing the medieval need to tolerate imperfection in food storage. Medical tools and remedies were simultaneously necessary and unreliable. Bloodletting instruments, leeches, cupping tools, and herbal concoctions were prone to causing harm. Yet they persisted because alternative treatments were limited. Medieval people understood that no cure was perfect, and any chance of improvement was worth pursuing. Patients endured pain, risk, and uncertainty because partial benefit outweighed total inaction. Modern medicine, while safer and more effective, still deals with side effects, errors, and unintended consequences, reflecting the same fundamental challenge medieval society faced. Survival often outweighed perfection. Entertainment too was defined by persistent flaws. Musical instruments, crafted by hand from wood metal, often warped or went out of tune within days. Dice were uneven. Skewing games of chance, board games and toys broke easily, frustrating players. Yet people tolerated these flaws because social interaction, mental engagement, and cultural rituals mattered more than mechanical perfection. Modern toys and games are sturdier and more reliable, but maintenance, repairs, and occasional malfunction still mirror medieval realities. The principle remains: imperfection can coexist with value, as long as adaptation is possible. Transportation infrastructure reflected similar challenges. Roads were uneven, muddy, and often impassable during rain or snow. Bridges swayed, cracked, or collapsed under weight. Wagons and carts frequently broke, leaving travelers stranded. People adapted by repairing vehicles constantly, reinforcing bridges, and planning travel around known hazards. Modern vehicles and infrastructure are far more reliable, yet accidents, breakdowns, and maintenance problems demonstrate that tolerating imperfection in transportation is not just a medieval problem, it is a human one. Religious and ceremonial products, while often deeply symbolic, also failed repeatedly. Candles burned unevenly, incense extinguished prematurely, and ritual implements deteriorated quickly. People tolerated these flaws because the spiritual and social significance outweighed material imperfections. Modern ceremonial tools still face similar challenges, balancing functionality with symbolism. By the end of Chapter 1, a clear pattern emerges: medieval products survived because failure was expected, manageable, and culturally integrated. People adapted, patched, supplemented, and tolerated imperfection because survival, social order, and ritual significance were more important than flawlessness. Predictable flaws became familiar, and familiarity became comfort, shaping daily routines and societal norms. Even the most catastrophic failures did not prevent a product from enduring. Wooden utensils, fragile clothing, smoking candles, splintering plows, leaky barrels, unreliable medical tools, uneven dice, and collapsing bridges all persisted because humans learned to navigate, compensate, and adapt. Modern society inherits this same principle: imperfection is inevitable, and success is measured by resilience, resourcefulness, and adaptation rather than flawlessness. In the early medieval world, the line between necessity and failure was thin, and yet survival depended on navigating it. Chapter 2 explores some of the most striking examples of medieval products that failed spectacularly, yet persisted, often becoming so ingrained in daily life that their flaws were accepted as normal. In a world without standardized manufacturing, quality control, or easy replacements, the imperfections of everyday items were inevitable, and adaptation became a crucial survival skill. One of the first areas where failure was evident is in the kitchen. Cooking was a constant challenge, requiring tools that were crude by modern standards and susceptible to rapid deterioration. Knives, essential for preparing food, dulled quickly. They were hand-forged from iron, often inconsistently heated, leaving blades uneven, brittle, or prone to bending. Knives that dulled after a few days could still be used, but the work became more dangerous and slower. Chopping boards, often carved from soft woods, cracked under repeated use, especially when exposed to heat, moisture, or sharp impacts. Cauldrons, the workhorses of medieval cooking, were made from iron or bronze and often warped when exposed to open flames, changing shape and causing spills or uneven heating. These imperfections did not prevent people from using these tools because cooking was negotiable. Without food, survival was impossible. Medieval cooks adapted by constantly monitoring heat, rotating pots, sharpening knives frequently, and repairing cracked boards with resin or leather bindings. The imperfections became part of the rhythm of daily life, teaching patience, ingenuity, and resilience. Food storage presented another domain where failure was constant yet unavoidable. Barrels, ceramic jars, and woven baskets were essential for preserving grains, salted meats, and dairy, yet they were all prone to significant problems. Wooden barrels leaked, allowing moisture to spoil grain and encourage mold or pest infestation. Ceramic pots cracked under sudden temperature changes or from being handled roughly. Baskets, while useful for carrying and storing food, attracted rodents or insects that consumed or contaminated their contents. Despite repeated failures, these products persisted because they offered the only practical means to store food. People compensated by layering containers, rotating stock, covering baskets with cloths or animal skins, and constantly inspecting stored items for damage or spoilage. Modern refrigeration, airtight containers, and chemical preservatives have reduced spoilage dramatically, but leaks, contamination, and minor failures still occur, echoing the medieval struggle to manage imperfection. Lighting products were equally flawed but indispensable. Candles, made from tallow or beeswax, burned unevenly and produced thick, smoky odors that stained walls and made breathing difficult. Rushlights, simple sticks of plant fibers soaked in animal fat, were unpredictable, often sputtering or extinguishing entirely. Oil lamps leaked, sometimes igniting fires or creating unpleasant odors in living spaces. Despite these repeated failures, light was essential for work, study, rituals, and social interaction. Medieval household adapted by layering multiple light sources, adjusting wick lengths, and timing activities according to the hours of natural light. People accepted flickering and smoke as part of daily life, demonstrating a resilience and tolerance for imperfection that allowed them to function despite unreliable tools. Modern electric lighting has solved most of these problems. Yet flickering bulbs, temporary outages, and maintenance needs echo the medieval principle of managing imperfect light. Clothing and footwear were another category of products that consistently failed yet remained essential. Wool, the most common fabric, shrank, itched, and lost shape quickly, especially when wet or washed. Linen tore easily, leaving garments vulnerable to wear and exposure. Shoes, made of basic leather, often wore down rapidly or became misshapen, exposing the wearer's feet to injury, cold, and mud. Fastenings, such as buttons, clasp pins, frequently broke or came loose, forcing constant adjustment. Despite these flaws, people wore clothing and shoes because warmth, protection, and social propriety demanded it. Solutions included layering garments, reinforcing worn areas, and reusing old shoes patched with leather scraps or extra stitching. Modern clothing and footwear improve durability and comfort through synthetic materials, rubber soles and mass production, yet blisters, torn seams, and misfitting shoes remind us that even the most advanced tools still face challenges reminiscent of medieval realities. Medical remedies and instruments also reflect enduring failure. Leeches, cupping instruments, and bloodletting tools were standard treatments, yet they were risky, often causing infection or excessive blood loss. Herbal remedies sometimes worsened conditions or failed entirely. Despite these dangers, they persisted because alternatives were extremely limited. Survival often meant choosing the lesser risk, even if it involved imperfect or harmful tools. Patients and caregivers developed strategies to manage these flaws: careful monitoring, combining treatments, or substituting methods, depending on the patient's response. Modern medicine, while dramatically more precise and effective, still faces errors, side effects and unforeseen outcomes, proving that tolerating imperfection has been a long-standing necessity. Entertainment and leisure were no exception to the rule of tolerable failure. Musical instruments were crafted by hand, leading to warped bodies, uneven strings or inconsistent tuning. Flutes could crack, drums might tear. Stringed instruments frequently went out of tune. Dice, essential for games of chance, were often uneven, producing unfair results. Board games and small toys were fragile, breaking easily during play. Despite this, these products endured because social, cultural, and emotional value outweighed functional perfection. People adapted by tuning instruments repeatedly, replacing broken game pieces, or improvising solutions to continue their activities. Modern games, toys, and instruments are far more reliable, yet maintenance, repair, and occasional breakages demonstrate the continuity of medieval strategies for managing imperfection, while still enjoying value and purpose. Transportation infrastructure also exposed daily life to repeated failure. Roads were primitive, muddy, and uneven, turning treacherous during rain or snow. Bridges often swayed, cracked, or collapsed under heavy loads. Wagons, carts, and carriages were prone to breakage, leaving travelers stranded far from help. People adapted by reinforcing wagons, traveling in groups for safety, or using alternative paths when roads became impassable. Horses and oxen were trained to navigate obstacles, and tools were constantly repaired to keep travel functional. Modern transportation has vastly improved reliability and safety, yet vehicle breakdowns, traffic accidents, and infrastructure failures still reflect the medieval reality. Imperfection is inevitable, and adaptation is essential. Religious and ceremonial products were also prone to failure, yet their symbolic importance ensured persistence. Candles used in churches burned unevenly, incense extinguished prematurely, and ritual implements were delicate and easily damaged. People tolerated these flaws because the spiritual and social significance outweighed the need for flawless performance. Modern ceremonial objects continue this balance, with durability often secondary to symbolic or aesthetic importance. Weapons and defensive tools illustrate another aspect of tolerable failure. Swords chipped easily, shields dented, and armor restricted movement while offering incomplete protection. Soldiers adapted by layering equipment, coordinating tactics, and relying on strategy over full reliability of their tools. Modern protective gear reduces risk, but no armor is perfect, and injuries still occur, showing that the principle of partial effectiveness enduring from medieval times continues to influence design and planning. Even furniture and household implements repeatedly failed. Chairs cracked, benches splintered, tables warped, and beds sagged under repeated use. Knives dulled, pots cracked, and domestic tools wore down rapidly. People adapted by repairing broken furniture, supplementing missing pieces, and using items carefully to prolong their utility. Modern furniture is sturdier and more reliable, yet wear, breakage, and maintenance echo the medieval reality. Products often fail, and survival requires adaptation. Heating, cooking, sanitation, clothing, lighting, medical tools, entertainment, transportation, and religious objects all share a common thread: repeated failure was expected, managed, and adapted to. Medieval society did not view failure as a sign of uselessness. It was a normal, predictable part of life that demanded ingenuity, patience, and resilience. People developed cultural and practical strategies to integrate flawed products into daily routines, ensuring survival despite the imperfections surrounding them. By the end of Chapter 2, it is evident that the endurance of these products was not accidental. Wooden utensils, splintering plows, cracked barrels, leaky pots, uneven candles, warped instruments, fragile clothing, faulty shoes, medical tools, dice, roads, bridges, and ceremonial objects all persisted because humans learned to manage their failures. Adaptation, repair, redundancy, and tolerance became central to medieval life. Survival and functionality were more valuable than perfection. Even the most catastrophic failures did not prevent these products from becoming indispensable. Medieval society demonstrates that imperfect tools, when understood, managed, and supplemented, can endure far longer than flawless items. This lesson is reflected in modern life. Kitchens still encounter broken utensils, shoes wear out, food spoils, electronics fail, vehicles break down, and instruments go out of tune. Human ingenuity, like that of medieval people, allows flawed products to remain functional and valuable. Survival, continuity, and adaptability matter more than flawlessness. In the medieval world, the line between functionality and failure was delicate. And yet survival depended on learning to navigate it. Chapter 3 delves into another set of medieval products that failed spectacularly yet endured, because people could not live without them. The imperfections of daily life were not only expected, they were accepted as normal, and human ingenuity transformed flawed tools into manageable, even essential, parts of survival. One of the most striking areas of repeated failure was in household cooking. Knives were forged by hand from iron that was inconsistently heated, leaving blades prone to bending, dulling quickly, or chipping. A dull knife made food preparation slower and more dangerous. Yet households could not simply go without knives. People developed strategies to compensate their flaws: constant sharpening using stones or sand, using knives for lighter tasks while saving the stronger ones for tougher work, and even reshaping broken blades into smaller, secondary utensils. Chopping boards, often carved from soft wood, cracked under heavy use, exposed to moisture, or scorched by cooking fires. Cauldrons, essential for boiling water, stews and soups, warped when placed over open flames, leading to spills or uneven heating. Despite these constant problems, cooking tools endured because food was non-negotiable. The medieval household adapted, repaired, and improvised to maintain functionality in spite of flaws. Food storage presented another persistent challenge. Barrels, ceramic jars, and baskets were essential for keeping grains, salted meats and dairy, yet all were prone to failure. Wooden barrels often leaked, letting moisture ruin grains or invite pests such as weevils and rodents. Ceramic pots could crack if dropped or exposed to sudden temperature changes, wasting stored food. Woven baskets, though useful for transport and storage, often attracted insects or small animals that damaged contents. Despite repeated failures, storage tools persisted because they were necessary for survival. People compensated by layering containers, inspecting stored food regularly, and rotating stock to minimize loss. Modern refrigeration and airtight storage have reduced these problems, yet leaks, spoilage, and contamination occasionally still occur, demonstrating how medieval strategies of redundancy and careful management remain relevant. Lighting tools were equally flawed. Candles made from tallow or beeswax burned unevenly and produced thick smoke that could stain walls and irritate the eyes and lungs. Rushlights, a simple but unreliable source of illumination, sputtered or went out unpredictably. Oil lamps leaked or spilled, creating fire hazards in addition to providing dim, inconsistent light. Despite these flaws, light was essential for work, study, social activities and rituals. People adapted by using multiple sources of light, trimming wicks carefully, and arranging tasks according to natural daylight. Flickering light and smoke were tolerated as part of daily life, illustrating the medieval acceptance of imperfection as long as function remained. Modern electric lighting has largely eliminated these problems, yet temporary outages, flickering bulbs, and maintenance requirements echo the medieval struggle to maintain consistent illumination. Clothing and footwear were another area where failure was constant yet unavoidable. Wool garments shrank, lost shape, and itched, especially after exposure to moisture or repeated washing. Linen tore easily, leaving garments vulnerable to wear or the elements. Shoes, crafted from basic leather, wore down quickly and often left feet exposed to mud, cold, or sharp objects. Fastenings such as buttons, pins and clasps frequently broke or came loose. Despite these shortcomings, clothing and footwear remained essential for protection, warmth and social propriety. Solutions included layering garments, reinforcing torn areas, patching worn shoes, and creatively reusing old clothing. Modern textiles, synthetic fibers and rubber soles improve durability and comfort. Yet blisters, torn seams, and misfitting garments remind us that even the most advanced products cannot completely eliminate the need for adaptation. Medical products and remedies were particularly prone to failure. Bloodletting instruments, leeches, cupping tools, and herbal concoctions could cause harm or prove entirely ineffective. Despite these risks, such tools persisted because alternatives were limited, and any chance of improvement was better than none. Patients were monitored closely, treatments adjusted, and multiple approaches combined to compensate for the shortcomings of individual remedies. Modern medicine has increased precision and safety, yet errors, side effects, and unexpected outcomes demonstrate that medieval tolerance for imperfect tools was a rational response to life's uncertainties. Entertainment and leisure were also defined by repeated failure. Musical instruments, made by hand from wood, and animal parts, warped easily, went out of tune quickly, or produced uneven sound. Flutes could crack, stringed instruments often snapped, drums tore with regular use. Dice, vital for games of chance, were uneven, leading to unfair results. Board games and small toys broke easily during play. Despite these shortcomings, people tolerated flaws because entertainment, social interaction, and cultural participation were more valuable than mechanical perfection. Modern toys and instruments are sturdier, yet maintenance, repair, and occasional malfunctions continue to reflect medieval reality's value is not determined solely by material perfection, but by engagement and purpose. Transportation infrastructure was rife with repeated failure. Roads were often muddy and uneven, or obstructed, turning travel into a dangerous endeavor, especially during bad weather. Bridges, constructed from wood or stone, swayed, cracked or collapsed under heavy loads. Wagons and carts broke frequently, leaving travelers stranded. Animals pulling these vehicles could be injured by faulty harnesses or uneven terrain. Adaptation was constant. Travelers repaired wagons, reinforced bridges, and carefully planned routes. Modern infrastructure is more reliable, yet breakdowns, accidents, and temporary closures continue to highlight the persistent challenge of managing imperfect tools for transport. Religious and ceremonial products were no less prone to failure. Candles in churches often burned unevenly, incense extinguished prematurely, and ceremonial objects were fragile and easily damaged. Despite these flaws, they persisted because the spiritual and cultural importance outweighed the inconvenience or risk of failure. Modern ceremonial tools still balance symbolism with durability, reflecting the medieval priority of meaning over material perfection. Weapons and defensive equipment were repeatedly flawed but essential for survival. Swords chipped, shields dented, and armor restricted movement while offering incomplete protection. Soldiers adapted by layering equipment, relying on strategy, and supplementing flawed tools with ingenuity. Modern protective gear is more effective, yet failure and injury are never fully eliminated. demonstrating the enduring relevance of medieval approaches to risk management. Household furniture and domestic tools were constantly subject to wear and failure. Chairs, benches, tables, and beds cracked or warped over time. Knives dulled, pots cracked, and tools wore down. People adapted by repairing broken furniture, repurposing worn tools, and using items carefully to prolong their usefulness. Modern furniture and utensils are sturdier and more reliable, yet maintenance, repair, and occasional breakage reflect the same pattern of tolerable failure observed in medieval households. Heating and fire. Related products were another persistent challenge. Hearths and stoves burned unevenly, producing smoke and inconsistent heat, while indoor fires were dangerous if mismanaged. Wood and charcoal burned unpredictably, sometimes producing too little warmth and other times threatening to ignite a home. People adapted by using multiple heat sources, monitoring fires constantly, and supplementing warmth with blankets, heated stones or portable braziers. Modern heating systems reduce most risks, yet outages uneven warmth, and mechanical failures serve as modern echoes of medieval imperfection. By the end of Chapter 3, it is clear that medieval life was defined by a constant negotiation with failure. Wooden utensils, splittering plows, cracked barrels, smoky candles, brittle armor, uneven dice, fragile furniture, and unreliable roads all persisted because people could adapt, repair and compensate. Flawed products were not useless, they were manageable, necessary, and integrated into a culture that accepted imperfection as part of daily survival. Even catastrophic failures could not prevent the endurance of these products. The combination of necessity, adaptation, and human ingenuity ensured that imperfect tools remained functional and relevant. Modern society, despite technological advancements, continues to echo this medieval principle: broken kitchen tools, misfiring vehicles, spoiled food, worn clothing, malfunctioning instruments, and infrastructure failures all require adaptation, repair and tolerance for imperfection. Survival and continuity matter more than flawless performance. By the time the late Middle Ages arrived, people had become intimately familiar with failure in every aspect of daily life. Yet the products they relied on continued to persist, because the alternatives were far worse. Chapter 4 explores the next set of medieval products that failed repeatedly but survived, showing how human ingenuity, adaptation, and sheer necessity allowed them to endure despite their imperfections. In a world without mass production, standardized measurements, or quality control, failure was expected, accepted, and often integrated into the rhythm of everyday existence. Cooking and kitchenware were among the most common areas where failure was unavoidable. Wooden spoons, bowls, and ladles were carved by hand from available timber, often with uneven or imperfect tools. The wood splintered, cracked, or warped, especially when exposed to heat, moisture, or repeated use. Knives, forged by local blacksmiths, dulled quickly, bent under pressure, or chipped during the preparation of tougher foods. Cauldrons, essential for boiling, frying, and stewing, often warped or developed uneven bottoms from exposure to open flames. Despite these repeated failures, medieval people could not simply abandon these tools. Food was essential to survival, and imperfect kitchenware was better than none. Households adapted by rotating utensils for specific tasks, sharpening knives constantly, patching cracked bowls with resin or metal strips, and improvising with available materials. Imperfection became an expected part of the process, and the ability to manage flaws defined successful daily life. Food storage presented equally significant challenges. Wooden barrels often leaked, allowing moisture to ruin grains, invite pests, or cause fermentation in unwanted circumstances. Ceramic jars could crack under sudden temperature changes or if mishandled. Woven baskets, while practical for transport, were susceptible to insect and rodent infestations. Despite these repeated failures, these products persisted because some method of storage was essential for survival. People compensated through redundancy, layering containers, rotating stock to minimize spoilage, inspecting contents frequently, and using coverings made of cloth, leather, or straw. Modern refrigeration, vacuum-sealed containers, and airtight jars have eliminated many problems, yet spoilage, leaks, and contamination still occasionally occur. Echoing the medieval principle that imperfect storage can be managed with foresight and adaptation. Lighting was another domain in which failure was constant. Candles made from tallow produced thick smoke, burned unevenly, and required constant attention to prevent premature extinction. Beeswax candles burned more cleanly but were expensive and often reserved for the wealthier classes. Rushlights, sticks of plant fiber soaked in animal fat, were unpredictable, sputtering or going out entirely at inconvenient moments. Oil lamps leaked or spilled, sometimes igniting fires, creating both danger and annoyance. Despite these flaws, light was indispensable for work, social interaction, religious observance, and study. Households adapted by using multiple light sources, adjusting wick lengths, and performing activities according to the hours of natural daylight. People learned to tolerate smoke, flicker, and dimness because survival, productivity, and social cohesion depended on it. Modern electric lighting has solved many of these issues, but flickering bulbs, power outages, and dim or uneven illumination reflect the same challenges faced by medieval households, proving that tolerating imperfection remains a human necessity. Clothing and footwear were constantly failing yet remained essential. Wool garments shrank, lost shape, or became itchy when wet or washed. Linen tore easily, and shoes, often made from coarse leather, wore down quickly or became misshapen. Fastenings such as pins, clasps, and buttons frequently failed, leaving robes gaping or footwear unstable. Despite these flaws, clothing was non-negotiable for protection against cold injury and social scrutiny. Solutions included layering garments for warmth, reinforcing worn areas with additional stitching, repurposing old shoes, and creatively reusing scraps of fabric. Modern textiles, synthetic fibers, and rubber soles have reduced these problems considerably, yet blisters, torn seams, and ill-fitting shoes continue to demonstrate that even advanced production cannot entirely eliminate imperfection. Medical tools and remedies also exemplified the persistence of flawed products. Bloodletting instruments, leeches, cupping tools, and herbal concoctions could be harmful, ineffective, or even deadly, yet they persisted because alternatives were extremely limited. Patients were monitored carefully, treatments were combined, and strategies were improvised to compensate for flaws. Modern medicine is far safer and more effective, but errors, side effects, and unforeseen outcomes remain, proving that tolerance for imperfect tools is a rational, timeless strategy in managing risk and survival. Entertainment and leisure were no less affected by repeated failure. Musical instruments were handcrafted, often warping, breaking, or going out of tune quickly. Flutes cracked, drums tore, stringed instruments snapped. Dice were uneven, producing unfair results in games of chance. Board games and toys were fragile, breaking during use. Despite these flaws, people tolerated imperfections because cultural, social, and emotional value outweighed mechanical perfection. Modern games and instruments are more reliable, but maintenance, repair, and occasional malfunction remain necessary, reflecting the enduring lesson that imperfection does not negate usefulness. Transportation infrastructure and tools were notoriously unreliable. Roads were uneven, muddy, and frequently obstructed, especially during inclement weather. Bridges swayed, cracked, or collapsed under heavy loads, and wagons often broke down, stranding travelers miles from help. Animals pulling carts could be injured or stumble over poorly constructed roads. People adapted through constant repair, careful handling, reinforcement, and planning travel routes around known hazards. Modern vehicles and infrastructure reduce risk, but accidents, breakdowns, and closures continue to mirror the medieval reality that managing imperfection is essential for survival. Religious and ceremonial tools were also prone to repeated failure yet survived due to their symbolic significance. Candles in churches burned unevenly, incense extinguished prematurely, and ceremonial objects were delicate or fragile, despite material flaws. These items persisted because their spiritual and cultural value outweighed the inconvenience of failure. Modern ceremonial tools still navigate the balance between function and symbolism, reflecting the long-standing medieval prioritization of meaning over perfection. Weapons and defensive equipment exemplified tolerable failure in its most dramatic form. Swords chipped, shields dented, and armor restricted movement while offering incomplete protection. Soldiers adapted by layering equipment, developing strategies, and relying on coordination to offset the shortcomings of their tools. Modern protective gear and weaponry are far more reliable, yet no armor is completely foolproof, and equipment failures still occur. The medieval principle of partial effectiveness, supplemented by skill and strategy, continues to inform modern safety and combat design. Household furniture and domestic tools failed frequently. Chairs cracked, benches splintered, tables warped and bent sagged under constant use. Knives dulled, pots cracked, and essential implements wore down. People repaired broken items, repurposed old tools, and learned to handle objects carefully to extend their usefulness. Modern furniture and utensils are sturdier, yet wear, maintenance, and occasional breakage remain inevitable, demonstrating that even today, human adaptation is required when perfection is impossible. Heating and fire-related tools were particularly prone to failure. Hearths and stoves burned unevenly, producing smoke and irregular heat. Wood and charcoal were inconsistent, sometimes producing too little warmth, other times creating dangerous flare-ups. People adapted through careful fuel management, multiple heat sources, portable braziers, and heated stones to maintain comfort and safety. Modern heating systems mitigate most risks, but outages, uneven warmth, and mechanical failures persist, echoing the medieval challenges of managing imperfect fire and heat. Even the most catastrophic failures could not prevent these tools from enduring. The combination of necessity, adaptation, and resourcefulness ensured that flawed products remained functional and valuable. Modern society continues to echo this principle. Kitchen utensils still break, shoes wear out, food spoils, instruments fall out of tune, vehicles fail, and infrastructure deteriorates. Human ingenuity allows imperfect tools to remain useful, just as it did in medieval times. Survival and continuity matter far more than flawless execution. In the medieval world, daily life was defined by a constant negotiation with failure. Products and tools that were essential for survival often failed repeatedly. Yet they persisted because there were no alternatives. Chapter 5 explores yet another set of medieval items that failed spectacularly, but endured because people adapted, repaired, and tolerated imperfection as a normal part of life. This pattern reveals a deep pragmatism that underpinned medieval society, one that valued functionality and survival over perfection, a principle that continues to resonate in modern life. Kitchen and cooking implements were among the first products to face repeated failure. Wooden spoons, bowls, and ladles were carved by hand from timber, often uneven and prone to splintering. Knives, forged by local blacksmiths, dulled, quickly bent, or chipped under heavy use. Cauldrons essential for boiling water, stews, and soups, often warped when placed over open flames, causing uneven cooking and spills. Despite these shortcomings, these items persisted because food preparation was non-negotiable. Medieval cooks developed strategies to compensate for flaws, such as sharpening knives constantly, rotating utensils for specific tasks, patching cracks with resin or metal, and adjusting cooking methods to accommodate warped cauldrons. Imperfection became part of the rhythm of daily life, and managing these failures was a necessary skill for survival. Food storage presented its own challenges. Wooden barrels leaked, allowing moisture to ruin grains or encourage pest infestations. Ceramic jars from sudden temperature changes or rough handling. Woven baskets were vulnerable to insects and rodents. Despite repeated failures, these products endured because storage was vital for survival. People developed workarounds, including layering containers, inspecting food regularly, rotating stock, and using coverings made from cloth, leather, or straw. Modern refrigeration and airtight containers have drastically reduced spoilage, yet leaks, contamination, and occasional failure remind us of the medieval approach. Redundancy, vigilance, and adaptation are key when imperfection is unavoidable. Lighting was a persistent source of frustration yet essential for daily life. Candles made from tallow burned unevenly, produced thick smoke, and required constant attention. Beeswax candles burned more cleanly, but were expensive and mostly reserved for wealthier households. Rushlights made from plant fibers soaked in fat were unpredictable and often extinguished at critical moments. Oil lamps leaked or spilled, creating fire hazards. Despite these repeated failures, people relied on these light sources for work, study, and religious activities. Households adapted by using multiple sources of light, trimming wicks, and scheduling activities according to natural daylight. Medieval acceptance of flickering smoke and dimness demonstrates how people learned to tolerate imperfection while ensuring functionality. Modern electric lighting has solved many of these issues. Yet flickering bulbs, outages, and maintenance echo the medieval struggle to maintain consistent illumination. Clothing and footwear were also defined by frequent failure. Wool garments shrank, lost shape, and became itchy when wet or washed. Linen tore easily, and shoes, made from coarse leather, wore down quickly, exposing feet to cold, mud, and injury. Fastenings such as buttons, clasps, and pins often failed, leaving robes gaping or shoes unstable. Despite these shortcomings, clothing remained essential for protection, warmth, and social propriety. Solutions included layering garments, reinforcing worn areas, patching shoes, and creatively repurposing old clothing. Modern textiles, synthetic fibers, and rubber soles improved durability and comfort, yet blisters, torn seams, and misfitting shoes demonstrate that even today, humans must adapt to the imperfections of essential tools. Medical products and remedies highlight the persistence of flawed tools. Bloodletting instruments, leeches, cupping tools, and herbal concoctions could harm patients. Yet they endured because alternatives were limited. Partial benefit was considered better than inaction. Patients and caregivers adapted by monitoring treatment closely, combining therapies, and adjusting remedies based on individual response. Modern medicine, though far safer and more effective, still faces errors, side effects, and unforeseen outcomes, reflecting the medieval strategy of accepting imperfection while managing risk. Entertainment and leisure products were similarly flawed yet persisted because social and cultural value outweighed material perfection. Musical instruments, handcrafted from wood, metal, and animal parts, warped or went out of tune quickly. Flutes cracked, drums tore, and stringed instruments snapped. Dice were uneven, creating unfair results, while board games and toys were fragile and broke during use. Despite these flaws, people adapted, repairing instruments, replacing broken game pieces, and improvising solutions. Modern instruments, toys, and games are more reliable, yet maintenance, repair, and occasional malfunction demonstrate continuity with medieval strategies for managing imperfection, while enjoying social and cultural value. Transportation infrastructure was notoriously unreliable. Roads were uneven, muddy, and obstructed, especially during rain or snow. Bridges swayed, cracked, or collapsed under heavy loads, while wagons frequently broke down. Animals pulling carts could stumble, tire, or become injured, compounding problems. People adapted by reinforcing wagons, repairing roads, coordinating travel in groups, and planning alternative routes. Modern vehicles and infrastructure reduce many risks. Yet breakdowns, accidents, and closures still remind us that imperfection is inevitable, and adaptation is essential. Religious and ceremonial products also endured repeated failure. Candles burned unevenly, incense extinguished prematurely, and ritual implements were fragile. Despite these flaws, they survived because spiritual and social significance outweighed the inconvenience of failure. Modern ceremonial tools continue to balance function and symbolism, reflecting medieval prioritization of meaning over flawless execution. Weapons and defensive tools exemplified tolerable failure in dramatic ways. Swords chipped, shields dented, and armor restricted movement while providing incomplete protection. Soldiers adapted by layering equipment, employing tactics, and relying on coordination rather than expecting flawless performance from their gear. Modern protective equipment is far more reliable. Yet no armor or safety gear is infallible, proving that medieval principles of partial effectiveness, supplemented by skill, remain relevant today. Household furniture and domestic tools were constantly prone to failure. Chairs, benches, tables, and beds cracked or warped under frequent use. Knives dulled, pots cracked, and utensils wore down. People adapted by repairing furniture, repurposing old tools, and handling items carefully to extend longevity. Modern furniture and utensils are sturdier, but wear, maintenance, and occasional breakage persist, demonstrating that tolerance and adaptation to imperfection are timeless strategies. Heating and fire-related tools were particularly unreliable. Hearths and stoves burned unevenly, produced smoke, and created fire hazards. Wood and charcoal burned inconsistently, sometimes providing insufficient heat and other times creating flare-ups. People adapted through multiple heat sources, careful fuel management, and portable braziers or heated stones. Modern heating systems reduce these risks, yet outages, uneven warmth, and occasional failures continue to reflect medieval challenges. By the conclusion of Chapter 5, a clear pattern emerges. Wooden utensils, cracked barrels, warped cauldrons, smoky candles, brittle armor, uneven dice, fragile furniture, leaky pots, unstable roads, and worn shoes persisted, because humans could manage, repair, and adapt to their flaws. Failure was expected, predictable, and manageable. People integrated these imperfect products into daily life because survival, functionality, and social cohesion mattered more than perfection. Even catastrophic failures could not prevent the endurance of these products. Necessity, adaptation, and resourcefulness ensured that flawed tools remained functional and valuable. Modern life continues to reflect this medieval principle. Broken kitchen utensils, misfiring vehicles, spoiled food, torn clothing, malfunctioning instruments, and deteriorating infrastructure all require repair, adaptation, and tolerance. Survival and continuity remain more important than flawless execution. Chapter 5 illustrates that medieval society viewed failure not as a reason to discard a product, but as an expected reality to be managed. Wooden spoons, cracked barrels, crooked knives, leaky pots, smoky candles, brittle armor, uneven dice, fragile furniture, and unstable roads persisted because people tolerated, repaired, and adapted to imperfection. This mindset left a lasting legacy, shaping modern expectations of resilience, resourcefulness, and the practical management of failure. Imperfection, when managed wisely, ensures survival and functionality, revealing a profound pragmatism that remains relevant to this day. In the medieval world, survival depended on adapting to products and tools that were imperfect at best and catastrophic at worst. Chapter 6 explores a range of items that repeatedly failed but remained in use because necessity left no alternative. The medieval mindset accepted imperfection as a normal condition of life, and the endurance of these flawed products highlights the ingenuity, patience, and resilience of the people who relied on them. One of the most essential yet flawed areas was the kitchen. Wooden spoons, bowls, and ladles, carved from hand-selected timber, splintered, warped, and cracked under heat or moisture. Knives, forged individually by blacksmiths, dulled quickly and bent under heavy use, sometimes chipping dangerously. Cauldrons, essential for cooking stews, boiling water, and preparing communal meals, often developed uneven bottoms from exposure to open flames, leading to spills and partially cooked food. Despite these repeated failures, these tools were indispensable. People adapted by rotating utensils for different purposes, sharpening knives constantly, repairing cracked bowls with resin or metal, and adjusting cooking techniques to accommodate imperfect cauldrons. In kitchens across the medieval world, imperfection became a constant companion, and mastery of these flawed tools was a mark of skill and survival. Food storage presented its own persistent challenges. Wooden barrels frequently leaked, allowing moisture to spoil grains, salted meats, and preserved foods. Ceramic jars cracked easily and woven baskets were vulnerable to pests and rodents. Despite these flaws, storage tools endured because some form of containment was essential for survival. People adapted by layering containers, rotating food supplies, inspecting contents frequently, and covering baskets with cloth or leather to protect against infestation. Modern refrigeration, airtight containers, and vacuum sealing have largely resolved these problems, yet spoilage, leaks, and contamination still occur, echoing medieval strategies of redundancy, careful management, and constant vigilance. Lighting was another source of repeated failure, yet it remained indispensable. Candles made from tallow produced thick smoke, burned unevenly, and required careful monitoring to prevent early extinguishment. Beeswax candles burned more cleanly but were costly and primarily available to the wealthy. Rushlights, sticks of plant fiber soaked in fat, were notoriously unreliable, often sputtering or going out at critical moments. Oil lamps leaked, spilled, or caused fires in crowded spaces. Despite these shortcomings, light was essential for work, social interaction, religious practices, and study. People adapted by using multiple light sources, trimming wicks, arranging activities according to daylight, and accepting smoke and flicker as part of daily life. Modern electric lighting reduces many of these challenges, yet flickering bulbs, outages, and uneven illumination serve as reminders of the medieval struggle to maintain consistent, functional light. Clothing and footwear were also defined by frequent failure yet remained indispensable. Wool garments shrank, lost shape and itched, especially after wetting or washing. Linen tore easily, and shoes made from coarse leather wore down quickly or became misshapen, leaving them exposed to injury, mud or cold. Fastenings such as buttons, clasps, and pins frequently failed, leaving robes gaping or shoes unstable. People adapted by layering garments, reinforcing worn areas with stitching or patches, and creatively reusing old shoes and clothing. Modern textiles, synthetic fibers, and rubber soles improve durability and comfort, yet blisters, torn seams, and ill-fitting shoes illustrate that adaptation to imperfection remains a necessity. Medical tools and remedies highlighted the endurance of flawed products. Bloodletting instruments, leeches, cupping devices, and herbal concoctions could be ineffective, harmful, or even deadly. Yet they remained in use because alternatives were limited. People monitored treatment carefully, adjusted methods, and combined multiple remedies to compensate for individual shortcomings. Modern medicine, though far safer and more effective, continues to encounter errors, side effects, and unforeseen complications, illustrating that tolerance for imperfection has always been a rational and practical strategy in managing risk and survival. Entertainment and leisure products were equally imperfect yet culturally significant. Musical instruments, crafted by hand, warped easily, snapped, or went out of tune quickly. Flutes cracked, stringed instruments broke, and drums tore during use. Dice were often uneven, producing unfair results, while board games and toys were fragile and frequently broke. Despite these flaws, people adapted by repairing instruments, replacing broken game pieces, and improvising solutions. Modern instruments, toys and games are more durable, yet maintenance, repair, and occasional malfunction continue to reflect the same medieval reality. Value often depends on engagement and purpose, not material perfection. Transportation infrastructure presented another area of persistent failure. Roads were uneven, muddy, and prone to obstruction, especially during inclement weather. Bridges swayed, cracked, or collapsed under heavy loads. Wagons and carts broke frequently, leaving travelers stranded. Animals pulling carts could stumble, tire, or become injured, compounding the risks. People adapted by reinforcing wagons, repairing roads, traveling in groups, and planning alternative routes. Modern vehicles and infrastructure reduce many of these risks, yet breakdowns, accidents, and closures continue to demonstrate that imperfection is inevitable and adaptation essential. Religious and ceremonial tools were no exception. Candles burned unevenly, incense extinguished prematurely, and ceremonial objects were fragile. Despite these repeated failures, they persisted because spiritual and social significance outweighed the inconvenience of malfunction. Modern ceremonial tools continue to balance symbolism and function, reflecting medieval priorities that emphasized meaning over perfection. Weapons and defensive equipment highlighted tolerable failure in high-stakes situations. Swords chipped, shields dented, and armor restricted movement while providing incomplete protection. Soldiers adapted by layering equipment, developing tactics, and relying on skill rather than expecting flawless performance from their gear. Modern protective equipment and weaponry are more reliable, yet no armor is completely foolproof and failures still occur, demonstrating that medieval principles of partial effectiveness, supplemented by human skill, remain relevant today. Household furniture and domestic tools were constantly prone to failure. Chairs, benches, tables, and beds cracked or warped under repeated use. Knives dulled, pots cracked, and utensils wore down quickly. People repaired broken furniture, repurposed old tools, and used items carefully to extend their lifespan. Modern furniture and utensils are sturdier, yet wear, maintenance, and occasional breakage persist, illustrating that adaptation to imperfection remains necessary. Heating and fire-related tools were especially unreliable. Hearths and stoves burned unevenly, producing smoke and inconsistent heat. Wood and charcoal burned unpredictably, sometimes creating insufficient warmth, other times dangerous flare-ups. People adapted with multiple heat sources, careful fuel management, portable braziers, and heated stones to maintain comfort and safety. Modern heating systems reduce most risks, yet outages, uneven warmth, and mechanical failures reflect the medieval challenge of managing imperfect fire and heat. By the end of Chapter 6, a clear pattern emerges. Wooden utensils, cracked barrels, warped cauldrons, smoky candles, brittle armor, uneven dice, fragile furniture, leaky pots, unstable roads, and worn shoes survived because humans could manage, repair, and adapt to their flaws. Failure was expected, manageable, and culturally accepted. People integrated these imperfect products into daily life, because survival, utility, and social cohesion mattered more than perfection. Even catastrophic failures could not prevent the endurance of these items. Necessity, adaptation, and resourcefulness ensured that flawed tools remained functional and valuable. Modern society continues to reflect this principle. Broken kitchen utensils, misfiring vehicles, spoiled food, torn clothing, malfunctioning instruments, and deteriorating infrastructure all require adaptation, repair, and tolerance. Survival and continuity matter far more than flawless execution. Chapter 6 demonstrates that medieval society viewed failure not as a reason to discard a product but as a condition to be managed. Wooden spoons. Cracked barrel. One of the most pervasive areas of failure was the kitchen. Wooden utensils, bowls and ladles, carved by hand from timber, splintered, cracked, and warped under repeated use. Knives, forged individually by blacksmiths, dulled quickly, bent under pressure, or chipped, creating hazards in addition to inconvenience. Cauldrons, essential for preparing soups, stews, and boiling water, often developed uneven bottoms from exposure to open flames, causing spills and inconsistent cooking. Despite these repeated failures, these tools persisted because food preparation was non-negotiable. People developed strategies to compensate for flaws. Sharpening knives constantly, rotating utensils for specific tasks, repairing cracks with resin or metal, and adjusting cooking methods to account for warped cauldrons. In medieval kitchens, imperfection was a constant companion, and the ability to manage these flaws was a mark of skill and survival. Food storage presented its own persistent challenges. Wooden barrels frequently leaked, letting moisture spoil grains or encourage pest infestations. Ceramic jars cracked under sudden temperature changes or rough handling. Woven baskets were prone to insects and rodents, which consumed or contaminated stored food. Despite these repeated failures, storage tools endured because some method of containment was essential for survival. People adapted by layering containers, inspecting food regularly, rotating stock, and covering baskets with cloth or leather to protect against infestation. Modern refrigeration, vacuum sealed containers, and airtight jars have largely solved these issues, yet spoilage, leaks, and contamination continue to occur, demonstrating that medieval strategies of redundancy, vigilance, and careful management are still relevant. Lighting was another domain where failure was constant yet indispensable. Candles made from tallow burned unevenly, produced thick smoke, and required careful attention to avoid early extinction. Beeswax candles burned cleaner but were expensive and primarily available to the wealthier households. Rushlights, sticks of plant fiber soaked in animal fat, were notoriously unreliable, often sputtering or extinguishing at inconvenient times. Oil lamps leaked, spilled, and sometimes ignited fires. Despite these flaws, light was essential for work, social interaction, religious observances, and study. People adapted by using multiple sources of light, trimming wicks, and scheduling activities according to daylight. Medieval acceptance of flicker, smoke, and dim illumination demonstrates how imperfection became normalized, and households learned to function around it. Modern electric lighting has reduced many of these challenges, yet flickering bulbs, outages, and uneven illumination continue to echo the medieval struggle to maintain consistent light. Clothing and footwear were also constantly prone to failure yet remained indispensable. Wool garments shrank, lost shape, and became itchy, especially after wetting or washing. Linen tore easily, and shoes, made from basic leather, wore down quickly, leaving feet exposed to injury, mud, or cold. Fastenings such as buttons, clasps, and pins frequently failed, leaving garments or footwear unstable. Despite these shortcomings, clothing remained essential for protection, warmth, and social propriety. People adapted by layering garments, reinforcing worn areas, patching shoes, and creatively repurposing old clothing. Modern textiles, synthetic fibers, and rubber soles improve durability and comfort, yet blisters, torn seams, and misfitting shoes demonstrate that even today, humans must adapt to imperfection. Medical tools and remedies illustrate another domain of persistent failure. Bloodletting instruments, leeches, cupping devices, and herbal concoctions could be harmful, ineffective, or deadly, yet they remained in use because alternatives were limited. Patients and caregivers adapted by closely monitoring treatments, combining remedies and adjusting methods to compensate for individual shortcomings. Modern medicine, although far safer and more precise, still encounters errors, side effects, and unforeseen complications, showing that tolerance for imperfection has long been a practical strategy in managing risk and survival. Entertainment and leisure products were equally flawed yet culturally significant. Musical instruments, handcrafted from wood, metal, and animal parts, warped easily, snapped, or went out of tune quickly. Flutes cracked, stringed instruments broke, and drums tore during use. Dice were often uneven, producing unfair results. And board games and toys were fragile, frequently breaking during play. Despite these flaws, people adapted by repairing instruments, replacing broken game pieces, and improvising solutions. Modern instruments, toys, and games are sturdier, yet maintenance, repair, and occasional malfunction continue to reflect the same medieval reality. Value often depends on engagement and purpose, not material perfection. Transportation infrastructure and tools were notoriously unreliable. Roads were uneven, muddy, and obstructed, especially during inclement weather. Bridges swayed, cracked, or collapsed under heavy loads, while wagons frequently broke down, leaving travelers stranded miles from help. Animals pulling carts could stumble, tire, or be injured, compounding problems. People adapted by reinforcing wagons, repairing roads, traveling in groups and planning alternative routes. Modern vehicles and infrastructure reduce many risks, yet breakdowns, accidents, and closures still demonstrate that imperfection is inevitable, and adaptation is essential. Religious and ceremonial tools were no less prone to failure. Candles burned unevenly, incense extinguished prematurely, and ritual implements were delicate or fragile. Despite these repeated failures, they persisted because spiritual and social significance outweighed inconvenience. Modern ceremonial tools continue to balance function and symbolism, reflecting medieval priorities that emphasized meaning over perfection. Weapons and defensive tools highlighted tolerable failure in high-stakes situations. Swords chipped, shields dented, and armor restricted movement while offering incomplete protection. Soldiers adapted by layering equipment, developing tactics, and relying on skill rather than expecting flawless performance from gear. Modern protective equipment and weaponry are more reliable, yet no armor or safety gear is infallible, and failures still occur, demonstrating that medieval principles of partial effectiveness supplemented by skill remain relevant today. Household furniture and domestic tools were constantly prone to failure. Chairs, benches, tables and beds cracked or warped under repeated use. Knives dulled, pots cracked, and utensils wore down quickly. People repaired broken furniture, repurposed old tools, and handled items carefully to extend lifespan. Modern furniture and utensils are sturdier, yet wear, maintenance, and occasional breakage persist, illustrating that adaptation to imperfection remains necessary. Heating and fire-related tools were particularly unreliable. Hearths and stoves burned unevenly, producing smoke and inconsistent heat. Wood and charcoal burned unpredictably, sometimes creating insufficient warmth, other times dangerous flare-ups. People adapted with multiple heat sources, careful fuel management, portable braziers, and heated stones to maintain comfort and safety. Modern heating systems reduce most risk, yet outages, uneven warmth, and mechanical failures reflect the medieval challenge of managing imperfect fire and heat. By the end of Chapter 7 a clear pattern emerges. Wooden utensils. Cracked barrels, warped cauldrons, smoky candles, brittle armor, uneven dice, fragile furniture, leaky pots, unstable roads, and worn shoes survived because humans could manage, repair, and adapt to their flaws. Failure was expected, manageable, and culturally accepted. People integrated these imperfect products into daily life, because survival, utility, and social cohesion mattered more than perfection. Even catastrophic failures could not prevent the endurance of these items. Necessity, adaptation, and resourcefulness ensured that flawed tools remained functional and valuable. Modern society continues to reflect this principle. Broken kitchen utensils, misfiring vehicles, spoiled food, torn clothing, malfunctioning instruments, and deteriorating infrastructure all require adaptation, repair and tolerance. Survival and continuity matter far more than flawless execution. Chapter 7 demonstrates that medieval society viewed failure, not as a reason to discard a product but as a condition to be managed. Wooden spoons, cracked barrels, crooked knives, leaky pots, smoky candles, brittle armor, uneven dice, fragile furniture, and unstable roads persisted because people tolerated, repaired, and adapted to imperfection. This mindset left a lasting legacy that continues to influence modern life. Imperfection, when handled wisely, does not hinder survival. It ensures it, reflecting a profound medieval pragmatism that remains relevant to this day. One of the most persistent areas of failure was in the kitchen. Wooden spoons, bowls, and ladles, carved by hand, splintered, warped, or cracked under heat, moisture, or heavy use. Knives forged individually by blacksmiths, dulled quickly, bent under pressure, or chipped, posing hazards while preparing food. Cauldrons essential for cooking soups, stews, and boiling water, often warped, creating uneven bottoms that led to spills and partially cooked food. Despite these repeated failures, these tools persisted because food preparation was essential to survival. Medieval cooks developed strategies to compensate, sharpening knives constantly, rotating utensils for specific tasks, repairing cracks with resin or metal, and adjusting cooking techniques to account for imperfect cauldrons. Imperfection was not only expected but integrated into the rhythm of daily life. Food storage presented its own challenges. Wooden barrels leak, allowing moisture to ruin grains, salted meats, and preserved foods. Ceramic jars cradden temperature changes or rough handling. Woven baskets, while practical for transport, attracted insects and rodents. Despite these flaws, storage tools endured because some method of containment was vital for survival. People adapted through layering containers, inspecting food regularly, rotating stock, and covering baskets with cloth or leather to protect against pests. Modern refrigeration and airtight containers have largely eliminated these problems, yet spoilage leaks and contamination occasionally occur, illustrating the enduring relevance of medieval strategies: redundancy, vigilance, and careful management. Lighting was another persistent area of failure. Candles made from tallow burned unevenly, produced thick smoke, and required constant attention. Beeswax candles burned cleaner but were expensive and primarily available to the wealthy. Rushlights, sticks of plant fiber soaked in animal fat, were unreliable, often sputtering or extinguishing at inconvenient moments. Oil lamps leaked or spilled, sometimes creating fire hazards. Despite these flaws, light was indispensable for work, social interaction, religious observance, and study. People adapted by using multiple light sources, trimming wicks, and scheduling activities according to daylight. Medieval households accepted flicker smoke and dim illumination as normal. Modern electric lighting resolves many of these challenges, yet flickering bulbs, outages, and uneven illumination echo the medieval struggle to maintain reliable light. Clothing and footwear were also plagued by repeated failure. Wool garments shrank, lost shape, and became itchy when wet or washed. Linen tore easily, and shoes made from coarse leather wore down quickly, exposing feet to mud, cold, and injury. Fastenings such as buttons, clasps, and pins frequently failed, leaving garments or shoes unstable. Despite these shortcomings, clothing remained essential for protection, warmth, and social propriety. People adapted by layering garments, reinforcing worn areas, patching shoes, and creatively repurposing old clothing. Modern textiles, synthetic fibers, and rubber soles improved durability, yet blisters, torn seams, and misfitting shoes demonstrate that adaptation to imperfection remains a necessity. Medical tools and remedies were especially flawed yet indispensable. Bloodletting instruments, leeches, cupping devices, and herbal concoctions could be harmful, ineffective, or even deadly. Yet they persisted because alternatives were limited. Patients were monitored closely, treatments adjusted, and multiple remedies combined to offset shortcomings. Modern medicine, though safer and more effective, still encounters errors, side effects, and unforeseen complications, showing that tolerance for imperfection has long been a practical survival strategy.